I got involved personally by being married to an adventurer.
When I married Bob, I learned in a hurry that he was an adventuresome fella. I always wanted to go east, he always wanted to go west.
I'm bound away across the wide Missouri.
The children used to ride their bikes down to the river, the Missouri River, and they spent a lot of time getting muddy and having a good time fishing and hunting, and they just have always loved the outdoors.
I suppose the very beginning part of this was probably in childhood when we used to spend a lot of time at the river, fishing and hunting. The river always had an ability to entertain us.
When our kids were small and adventuresome, that was a wonderful place to go. Well, we've been in the refrigeration business for some 40 years, and of course Dave and Greg both were in that with me. It's just a family business.
We meet hundreds of people every year running service calls around the Kansas City Independence area. And it was on one of those service calls that my brother met an older gentleman that was in his own right a treasure hunter.
The background, I suppose, was that I was interested in river history. And one day I happened to come across a guy that was also interested in the same kinds of things, but he was looking for steamboats.
Yeah, just an old character. Yeah, I'm not even sure I remember his name, but he dressed in black from head to toe, and I think he had dreamed about finding treasure in any format. And my brother that very day brought that story back to our families.
Well, one of his sons came in one day at lunch at my restaurant and said, "I've just met a gentleman that's looking for treasure on the Missouri River."
There's just nothing better, there's nothing more adventurous and more exciting than someone finding buried treasure, something that has been lost for a long, long time.
Around a table with Jerry Mackey, my father Bob, myself, we began to talk about the possibility of what this meant. And we knew that if this story was true, based on our earlier experience with the river, having it been narrowed from the Corps of Engineers works and the meandering channel altered drastically from its original channel in the 1800s, it just made sense to us that many of those steamboats may no longer be in the Missouri River, but rather scattered under agricultural farmland stretching from Montana to Missouri.
When we first initially discussed it, nobody had ever done this before. It was a freshwater excavation in the state of Missouri, and it had never been done. And so we decided, why not us? Nobody else had done it.
I've always worked with my family. I don't really know any other thing to do.
Everybody had a job that they sort of did, and I'd go to libraries and old museums and old courthouses in hunts of old records. Learned a lot about steamboats.
In 1856, a trip on steamboat from St. Louis to Kansas City was longer and more dangerous than a trip today from Kansas City to the moon.
It's the Mighty Mo, the Big Muddy. It's quite a river.
Too thick to drink and too thin to plow, the Missouri, the longest river system in North America, was, in the words of one old historian, dead set against being navigated. "We were 6 days going from St. Louis to St. Joe," wrote the world's most famous steamboat pilot, Mark Twain. "No record is left in my mind concerning it, but a confused jumble of savage-looking snags." Yet, despite the obstacles, the boats kept a-coming, and for good reason. You see, a few years earlier, the United States as we know it ended right here in Kansas City. Beyond was Indian territory. Many passed through it, few stopped. But in 1854, Congress opened wide this great green heart of America, an inland empire the size of France and Germany combined, to settlers from all over America, from all over the world. And during this, the golden age of river travel, many of these settlers, maybe most, came up the Mighty Mo. Among the 100 or so steamers on the river in 1856 was the Great White Arabia. Built in Brownsville, Pennsylvania in 1853, the boat had already endured 3 tough years on America's rivers, the average lifespan of a Missouri steamer being but 5. On August of that year, the Arabia steamed out of St. Louis bound for Omaha, Sioux City, and and all points in between.
From what we know, people who rode this boat, many of them were women and children coming up the river. The husbands had gone ahead of the families and had made a place for them on the frontier.
How our friends crowded around us at parting, wrote a Kansas-bound Ohio girl. Some cried and talked of Indians and bears. I recall my mother's headaches on the trip and how we longed for journey's end.
They must have been strong, sturdy frontiers women.
2 long years we've been away a rolling river. For 2 long years we've been awaiting. We're bound away across the wide Missouri. For the unlucky souls on the majestic Arabia, the journey would end all too soon.
A boat this size would use up to 32 cords of wood in a 24-hour steaming period. Well, guess where they cut the trees? Along the edge of the banks. And they cut a lot of trees. Well, those snags would die and drift off then into the river as the erosion took over, and that's what was in the river. And they would all be kind of slanted downstream because the water's taking them downstream. They're like torpedoes, a gauntlet. In other words, it's tough getting up the river. Not bad getting down, but tough getting up the river.
On the evening of September 5th, just beyond Kansas City, where it had stopped for loading, the Arabia headed unknowingly straight towards one of those lethal snags. Passenger Abel D. Kirk explains what happened next. We felt the shock at once, and the boat started sinking. There was a wild scene on board. The boat went down till the water came over the deck, and the boat keeled over on one side. The chairs and stools were tumbled about, and many of the children nearly fell into the river. The passengers scrambled to save their children and themselves, and did. But the mule, no one had time to save it or the freight as the Arabia went down.
Over 200 tons of cargo, you know, general merchandise, beautiful dishware, anything and everything that was for sale in 1856. You could say some of it was on this boat, and it all went down.
For Logan, Nebraska, 25% of the cargo was consigned there. Building supplies, warm clothing, boots and shoes and food. And they went without, and they suffered based on the fact that Logan deserted, and they all went across the river to Sioux City.
Lost too, or so they say, were 400 barrels of Kentucky's best bourbon. Sand and silt would bury the Arabia as the Missouri changed its course. But this loss assured that the Arabia, though gone, would never be forgotten.
Researched for 3 years and picked out 10 steamboats that we thought held promise. And of those 10 boats, the Arabia was the last one we searched for.
We don't have any real academic background to bring this about, but nevertheless, each one of us had some expertise, and I don't think we could have done it without any of us not being a part of that. I think that we would have failed, probably.
There's Jerry Mackey. He's been a long-term friend of my father, Bob, a very honorable person, someone that I admire greatly. Dave Luttrell. Dave read an article in the newspaper about our small group and contacted us, and we had been looking for someone that had the expertise in operating large, heavy equipment. And Dave Luttrell fit that need, and he also had, I think most importantly, a spirit of adventure. My older brother, David, is also part of this group, and a very meticulous individual, and has done also a lot of the research in our efforts. And then, of course, there's my father, Bob, that I can't speak enough about him. He really, in many ways, masterminded the whole salvage operation of the Arabia, something that no one had ever been able to do before.
He done a job no one else could have done.
And you have to understand, Jack, that we are principally blue-collar workers. We're average people. We're not wealthy. We're just common folks, just like you see walking on the street every day.
They're men that don't quit once they start, so I didn't have too much doubt that they could go on and do it.
When we approached Norman Sorter, the man that owned the property, he knew all about the Arabia.
He says, Dave, he says, you all can spend your money, if you want to, and your time, by digging this hole, but you'll never even see the boat, let alone get down to it, because of the amount of water that's in the ground.
It had been bedtime story talk for his family and dinner table talk for Norman for many, many generations, ever since his great-grandfather Elijah Sorter bought the property from the Wyandotte Indians. And for every generation of sorters, there had been someone just like us that had come along that said, we want to dig this steamboat in your field.
Norman Sorter and I set out one afternoon in July of 1987, and with a metal detector across my back, walked across this field back and forth until I finally stood on top of the location of where the Arabia was. I took a big surveyor ribbon out of my shirt pocket. It was fluorescent orange, and I tied it to the tallest stalk of corn that I could find. And when I got back to the road, I could look back, and I did. I stood there for a long time, and I looked back across this cornfield at that ribbon waving in the breeze. I said, that's where that boat's at. And that's where that boat's going to be tomorrow when I come back here and look at it again.
It was about the middle of October of '88 when we came in with our equipment and started to do the preliminary work of sinking wells and getting on with the project.
That was a wonderful time, filled with anticipation, and I can never remember working so hard in any one single day in my life, and at the same time had so much fun. It just seemed like for every foot we got a little deeper in the ground, we just got a little closer to our dreams.
Lots of folks told us that it would be very, very difficult to get this done. Some said it was impossible.
I thought they were crazy, if you want to know my honest feeling.
Thought we were nuts. Not so sure we weren't.
Somewhere back in the 1890s, a group of guys stood right here on this spot where we're standing now and had jabbed those rods in the ground, had found that boat. And they were going to go down and dig for that whiskey. And they tried real hard, but they never made it because of the groundwater. Just, in fact, 10 feet below us right here, you'd find water from the river and from other underground water sources would fill this ground with water, and they couldn't dig through it.
The water frustrated everybody, and it frustrated us. It was one major problem of the excavation.
November 16, '88. Finished drilling 12th well. It's dark, windy, wet, and cold. Drove home late and tired. Flo Hawley's journal.
And you'd have muddy hands when you're down digging in the mud all the time, and you'd want to wipe your nose because it would be running. And the only place that was really dry and pretty typically clean was on somebody else's back, right about here. And so if you could talk them into wiping your nose on their shoulder, that's about the only place you could wipe it.
On a cold, blustery winter's night when the temperatures are well below zero, you're in a position that you do not want to make a mistake. It's just a vulnerable place to be.
Only in winter, with the fields unplanted and the water table low enough even to hope that the dewatering system would prevail. Installing it was difficult and worrisome work, but it had to be done.
When we were lowering this pipe into the hole, it missed the hole and hit the ground, and it came unhooked.
And it stood just momentarily trying to make up its mind where to fall.
This pipe is 65 feet tall, and it's sitting there, and everybody hollered, of course, and then everybody froze to see which way it was going to go.
We were knee-deep in mud and a very dangerous situation.
It seemed like it stayed up there forever, and pretty soon it began to go, and everybody scrambled.
You're slipping in the mud, and it's holding you down, and it seems like though you're putting all your effort into it, you're just not making very much progress.
We had pipes to climb over, and we really didn't know, and it was a bad situation. It could have been a disaster.
I worried from day one somebody would be electrocuted with all the water and all the powers and the generators going. And to think that we made it through with just smashed fingers, broken ribs, and a little broken bone in Jerry Mackey's leg, and I am thankful for that.
November 28, 1988. Ground is still very muddy. Thus so are trucks, boots, pants, coats, gloves, steering wheels, etc. Rugs at home too. Flo Hawley's journal.
Well, the very first thing that we noticed was the upper spokes of the starboard paddle wheel. We all gathered in elbow to elbow, digging through the sand, some with our hands, some with shovels. But one spoke at a time, we began to emerge into view, and we realized that we had found the upper spokes of this wheel, this huge wheel, 28 feet in diameter. It's a massive thing.
The timbers coming out of the sand of the paddle wheel was a big day. That was a big day. We were just elated with that day.
And then a very unexpected discovery awaited us. There, caught in one of the spokes of the paddle wheel, was a small shoe.
Everybody come running from wherever they were working at. Guys that were running the dozers would climb off the dozers and run down the hill and stand in a little huddle around this one or two little items because of the first they'd seen.
We turned it over, the soles were all worn, and we could see written on the bottom, it said Goodyear. There's a Goodyear rubber shoe. And we just thought that that was probably the most wonderful discovery that we had ever made in our entire lives. And it must have looked to an outsider that we had been holding a gold bar in our hands because it was so wonderful. And I think it was at that moment that we all knew why we were there.
December 24th, 1988. Can see crates below. Too much mud and water. Tired, wait for another day. Besides, it's Christmas Eve. What a display of devotion digging in the wet and mud on a cold, blistering Christmas Eve. Flo Hawley's journal.
We had to wait for the groundwater to continue to go down, but as it went down, you began to see the little secrets that the Arabia had hidden all its life begin to just poke up through the sand. But at the same time, it's extremely frustrating because they were within your grasp, but the suction of the water table on wet sand would not allow you to free them.
The men had reached the boat, but the water wouldn't stop. Dig it a little deeper, and still more groundwater would rush upon them.
The key to the success on this excavation is removing the groundwater. And we had 4 generators going with 20 pumps, and if you lose one generator, you lose 4 to 5 pumps.
Situations occurred that were almost desperate.
The wind chills were down to 30 to 35 below zero. And we were very desperate that night because all the generators began to starve for fuel. And we had to manually carry buckets, 5-gallon buckets of fuel to each generator. And the wind was whistling so hard that it blew the diesel fuel from those buckets onto our legs and, of course, soaked through to the skin, and we lost our thermal protection at that point. And you lose feeling in your extremities very quickly.
I call it a 20-buck day. You know, we would have taken 20 bucks, or I would have, for my share that day.
But you have a job to do, and you just got to keep after it, or the work that you've done for the previous weeks and months can all be for nothing.
We finally got to a point where all 5 of us got together and said, look, to go any further, we're going to have to spend at least another $50,000 to buy more pumps and more wire, and it's going to have to back off from the dig part of it and set these wells and start pumping water out at a higher volume. Should we spend the money? Should we cut our loss now and forget it? Or should we go ahead and go for it, spend the extra money, and hope for the best?
And I know that there were times that each of us considered maybe we had made a mistake here, but somehow the other 4 partners would gather around that person and encourage him and lift him up, and we would keep going.
I've never thought that to quit in the middle of something was always a good thing to do.
In the event that you had to come up with the money, you would have to say, it would mean selling your house, or in all that you owned, really, to cover the debt, if it came to that.
I really never thought they'd ever find anything because in the research it said the Arabia had been salvaged.
As they dug deeper and deeper, this worry lingered on. The men knew that in 1897, Dad Henson and the Holt Syndicate claimed to have reached the Arabia's hold, only to find boots and lumber, nothing more.
I thought really they were wasting their time and their money.
On a cold December day, a single discovery would make a believer out of Flo, make a believer out of the world.
Without a question, without a doubt, the best day was the day that the first barrel appeared in front of us.
It was a day that our wives were home, and we immediately, of course, called them to come down to see this great and wonderful thing.
Bob called me about 4 in the afternoon and said, "Come on down, Flo." And I said, "I can't, I've got chili on the stove for supper." And he said in a tone of voice, "Well, shut that stove off and come down." And I realized then that maybe they had found something.
It was a big barrel of beautiful dishes.
And out of that one barrel, I took Freiburg and Cypress and Wedgwood. And we knew in our research that there was Wedgwood on the Arabia. And that was an exciting night.
We got back to my house that morning about 3:30 in the morning with 178 beautiful artifacts, all of them different and unique, And now our wives are all talking to us again, you know, they were excited. Can you imagine what it might have been if we'd have found a barrel of boots first? Not too good.
It was the turning point of the excavation, because prior to that we were going to sell everything. But it was the dishes that came out of the ground that day that brought us back together to rethink our whole project. We couldn't sell these, we couldn't break up the collection, it just wasn't going to happen.
From then on, I realized their dream really was going to come true.
And their dream really did come true. These families had found not just hardware, not just hats, nor clothes, nor boots, nor guns, nor cutlery, nor china, but an 1856 Walmart, the single greatest collection of pre-Civil War artifacts in the world.
A miracle of nature, I guess. Things such as perfume and liquor and things like that should have been spoiled, were not. The pickles were good. I tried some of them. They were still fresh and sweet. Yeah.
Within 4.5 months of starting the dig, the men had removed key parts of the Arabia and all of its contents, and the ground was ready for spring planting. The artifacts were stored in the coolers in Jerry Mackey's restaurant, where Greg Hawley guided the painstaking preservation.
If we had found this Arabia and we couldn't share it with anybody, it wouldn't be much fun.
The beauty of this project is the fact that we've done it with our friends and we've done it with our family.
It was something that you had to depend on everybody to do.
The timing was right, the 5 men that came together were right, each of them had their own thing to contribute. Maybe it was meant to be.
We seemed to be almost blessed in what we were doing.
It's kind of renewed my faith in the good old American way. It can still be done in America. If you have the desire and the persistence, you can get it done.
For far too long I've been a rolling river. For far too long I've been a roving away. We're bound away across the wide Missouri.
As for the whiskey, it was never found, or so they say.